Okay, I'll give you a little bit of background about Kapow. I know some of you know about Kapow. Many others of you probably haven't heard of Kapow in the past, so I'll just give you a little bit of background about where we've come from, which helps to set the context of what I'm going to show you about synthetic APIs. So we are actually a .com organisation, and originally we were built to be a marketplace, an online marketplace. So we're going back a few years now, 98 when we were founded. And our founder's vision was to build basically a comparative shopping website, which for 98 was quite a revolutionary concept. Unfortunately, the .com bubble burst, and that was the end of that as far as our founder was concerned. Needed to look for a new way to make his millions. And actually what he thought was, well, actually, building a comparison shopping website, what he needed to do was to be able to effectively go to every other website that he liked the look of out there. So, for example, real estate was one of the markets he was interested in. So there were many estate agents popping up online, and what he would do was he would go out there and aggregate all this content together into a local database that he could use as if it was his very own content. A bit like what Rightmove do now. And what he realised that we're doing was actually been building some technology that was very good for integrating web apps together. And this is the basis of what Kapow now is. So we have many different customers. Our customers span every industry, every size. Effectively, our customers are people who use web apps and need to integrate them together in some manner. I'll explain a little bit more of the detail of that. Oh, I should also point out, I need to point out, it's my duty too. Kapow software was acquired this time last year by Kofax. Some of you may know Kofax who scan documents. So, I'm sure you've all seen this slide. I'm going to whiz over it, but just to give you the Kapow spin on it a little bit, I'm sure you get the gist of this these days. So, obviously the critical data within any enterprise these days typically consists of both internal and external data. But what we see in terms of the growth area is definitely on the external side of things rather than the internal side of data. And we sort of loosely call this your business ecosystem. So what we're talking about here are your partners, your customers, your suppliers, perhaps government agencies, banks, you know, a whole range of NGOs. There's a whole load of stuff out there that would effectively be stakeholders who have an interest in your business, or you know, you could relate to these people. And really, to extract the value from this data, you probably need both the internal stuff, which is fairly well controlled, and the external content. And that's where the problem comes. Because typically this external content is relatively unstructured, not necessarily very clean, and difficult to get hold of. You know, there may be no APIs. I can't go to my, for example, if I'm an online retailer, I can't just phone up my major competitor and say, what I'd really like to do is get my pricing so it's better than yours. Do you mind sharing your pricing information with me? It's not going to happen. They're not going to say, oh yeah, I've got an API for that, here you go, just call this and away you go. It's just not going to happen. So that's where the challenge is. There's no API, or what we also find is there are APIs to some of these systems, but they're not as mature as we'd like them to be. They don't necessarily always work, or they don't necessarily always do exactly what they want them to do. And so this is a bit of a challenge as far as traditional integration is concerned. You know, this traditional integration really typically goes one of two ways. Either very low level at a data layer, so you know, maybe you can buy a feed of information, XML, JSON content or whatever from certain providers, or data.gov will give you, plenty of open data at a particular defined data structure. Or maybe you integrate via an API, and that's really the most common way of integrating applications. Get a programmer on site and say, look, I've got this application, that application, they've got a couple of APIs, go work your magic, glue them together, here's your requirements, away you go. All pretty straightforward, very established, traditional integration stuff. Oops. The problem is, when you don't have that API, then things become a little bit more tricky. What do you do? I've got a a slide here that illustrates some of the options that you have and some of the likely scenarios that you're going to encounter when these things happen. And so really talking about integration here. So we've got a firewall down there. Inside the organisation is to the left, external of the organisation to the right. Now, if your applications have well-defined APIs, then yeah, absolutely, you can integrate them without too much bother at all. That's not an issue. And there are a few applications out there, websites out there, services out there that have well-defined APIs. There are others that don't have fully formed APIs, but perhaps they have perhaps defined data structures that they use. Let's say they provide an XML document, or on the input side, maybe I can import content into an application if it has a particular sort of import-export format that's defined. So it's not quite API level, but it's doable, given a bit of effort. And guess what? There's a red category as well. These are the ones that are really tricky or impossible. You know, where you have no sort of direct relationship with the entities involved, no willingness to share information, no technical capabilities at the far end at all, or no commercial or political objectives, like, for example, the competitors example. You know, competitors are not just going to open up their data, I don't think, generally speaking. So very, very difficult to address. So actually, out of all of these connections, there's only a few that we find in reality that have these green links, these APIs that make your life a bit easier. The rest of them can be a real pain. So, what's the alternative? The alternative is where Kapow comes in, and what we try and help our customers do are build synthetic APIs. So effectively, what we do is, if you can access the application yourself, then you can use Kapow to build a synthetic API, almost sort of retrofit an API that does the job you want it to do onto any application that you've got access to. So in other words, if you can sort of see it in a web browser, so I can see my competitor's website in a web browser, then I can use Kapow to build a synthetic API that enables me to do a call that says basically something like, get competitor's product catalogue. And store that in a local database for myself. But it doesn't have to be external stuff, I could do internal stuff as well. You know, very often accessing internal systems is politically sensitive, particularly when you need an IT team involved that has to take, set up all the IT resources. Using synthetic APIs can be a very quick way of accessing this information, completely independent of existing APIs. Like the whole, everything turns green. If I can see it in a web browser, I can build a synthetic API, and then I can just wheel in my programmer and say, look, I've got an API for you to extract information from my competitor. Just call this, and then do your BI magic or whatever it happens to be behind the scenes. Now, I would say that I'll be completely open. This is not for every scenario. I can tell some of you in the room are thinking this. You know, if I'm HSBC and I'm doing an integration within my core banking application, I'm really not going to use Kapow to do this integration or link to my partners' systems. There are tried and tested, established processes, procedures, protocols, formats for doing that. And what we typically find is, within any organisation, within any of these sort of massive data collection activities, you will have some major critical core systems that are probably well supported with APIs, import-export formats and that sort of thing. They're usually the well-established core services. So I put sort of data.gov in this category. You know, there's a lot goes on behind the scenes to make those data sets available. But on the global scale, there is only so much they can do. There's only so many of these systems or applications that fit into this category. There's an awful lot on the long tail out there that don't fit into this category, that are not supported within interfaces at all. And that's where sort of applying traditional IT technologies to get this information can be very time-consuming and very painful. And that's really the focus of where Kapow fits in. We try and provide a very cost-effective, quick, and speed is of the essence with Capel, way of building these interfaces. So we're really about enabling this long-tail integration, if you like. This is a bit of a marketing slide, selling Capel. I'm not really interested in selling Capel here. The one thing that I'm interested in showing here is the statistic on the bottom left here. So this is sort of weekly statistics from our customers. And the important point here is our 300 plus customers actually interact on a weekly basis with over 150,000 different data sources. So this is just a sort of way of demonstrating that Capel can go and pretty much talk to anything. Where previously you need an API, which is a very small subset of applications and systems, Capel basically enables you to talk to anything. 150,000 different data sources are being used every week by our customers. And if we're all really lucky, I'm going to show you how that might actually work in reality now. So I'm going to try and talk you through a case study that one of our customers has done. I've somewhat simplified it just for time constraints, but you'll get the idea, hopefully, of what this is about and how our customer used open data to really help them with a key business problem. The case study itself comes from a global retail banking customer of ours. If you probably look through our website, you can probably work out who it is. But this is an anti-money laundering problem that they have. And the issue with retail banking and anti-money laundering is if you're a retail bank, you're not allowed to do business with certain people if they're criminals, terrorists, or fraudsters, or on various blacklists in various places. So every time somebody comes and signs up for a new account with this bank, they have to check. Have you been a naughty person? Are you on one of these blacklists? Does the FBI think you're a terrorist? And there are many different places that they have to look to actually do this. So I'm going to walk you through an example of what this might actually mean with a bit of luck. So this might look like Salesforce to you, but I can assure you it's not. This is my bank's core banking application, okay? And these are, you don't have to read the detail, but the idea is I've got a list of individuals and companies, because this is business banking as well, that I need to check on a daily basis to find out if I'm allowed to do business with these people. What we've also got, you may be able to see this, is there's another column here which shows me whether this individual has passed or failed my anti-money laundering check. Now what does that actually mean? Well, what that usually means is somebody has to come along and find one of these entries that's not been checked. And they have to say, okay, well, this is a gentleman by the name of Donald Asquith. I hope he's not in the building. But what do they actually do? Well, they have a list of different sites that they need to go and check to see if Donald Asquith is a fine upstanding citizen or not. So one of the sources of information that they might want to check is the Financial Conduct Authority, who publish a list of unauthorised firms and individuals. So what they would do here is obviously just go down to we're in the A section already. So does Mr. Asquith exist on this list? Doesn't look like he does. Maybe he's listed under D for Donald. Doesn't look like he does. Okay, so that's fine. Move on. Well, Interpol is another place that publishes a list of people that you're not allowed to do business with. So let's put in Asquith, let's put in Donald, let's see if he exists on this list. No, fine, onwards. FBI, great. Met Police produce something called Crime Stoppers that have lists of, again, some fine upstanding citizens that you probably don't want to do business with or not allowed to do business with. And the problem is just magnified on a global scale. You're probably getting a feel for the nature of this problem. Every site is different, they're not very sophisticated, there's no APIs there where I can just get a programmer to say, yeah, call the Crime Stoppers website, call the Interpol website, see if this person exists on this list. So what they really wanted to do was they wanted to have a consolidated database of all of these blacklists from around the world that's automatically refreshed on a daily basis, so they've got the latest up-to-date version of all these blacklists. And therefore, searching this one database will save them so much time, rather than having to manually go out and do all these checks against all these lists every day. So this is where Kapow joins the fray. I don't know how detailed you can see this, but effectively what I'm going to show you is the development tool that we use to go about building this consolidated list of stuff for the bank. So in our design tool, I have a list of projects that I'm working on down the left here, and we're going to just concentrate on one of these projects at the moment, which is my AML project. And effectively there are two different types of information that I'm interested in this design environment. The first are the data structures, or we call them types. So what I've done here is I've created a type called a fugitive, so I'm being very melodramatic on this. But really this is my data model, this is for my business, what do I want to store about these individuals? So I've just given them some attributes. I've said a source, where am I getting this information from? Is it Interpol? Is it the Financial Services Authority? Is it Dow Jones? Where am I getting this information from? I'm effectively collecting profiles, so I'm going to collect the URL. Where did I find this information about an individual? What category are they wanted for? What's their name? It doesn't have to be textual information, so I'm also taking an image. If they've got photos, I'll take that. And what are they wanted for? So it's a very, very simple data model that I've got here. What I'm actually going to do at the end of the day is I'm going to convert this structure into a database table, so I can just store my fugitives in a database table. So really quite simple. The complex stuff is, now what I need to do is I need to build some sort of mapping logic that maps the content I find on the FBI's website to this structure. And because I have one structure that represents these fugitives, I'm going to map everything from Interpol, from the FSA, from the FBI, from wherever, onto this common structure. So I'll have one nice common set of data. So how do we go about doing that? Well, we build what we call a robot. So this is the robot. It's really simple. Effectively, what you do is you build this robot up in the same way you would actually manually collect the content yourself. So in this particular case, I have one step in the robot. It's just loading a page. The page is, or this step is configured over here. I've actually given it a URL. This URL deals with Interpol, so we're going to try and collect the information from Interpol. So if I click past it, you can see here that we have a browser view, just as we saw in the external browser I was using a minute ago. But this is not a true browser, because if I start clicking on these links, for example, click on the member countries there, I haven't obviously followed that link, but you may be able to see I've got an indicator showing me the thing I've just clicked on, whether that's a link here, or an image, or a search box, or a little button. Don't really mind what it is. Whatever I click on, they use a weird style sheet here, so everything goes black when I hover over it. Click on the details link, for example. Whatever I click on, it's showing me that object, and then I can interact with that object within the rest of the robots. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that there's a source code view down here as well. Very often the information that you're interested in may not be present up here. So for example, at the moment I've just clicked on this details link, well it just says details in the web app, as far as I'm concerned as an end user. But maybe what I'm interested in is one of these IDs that I can only actually find in the HTML. This extra metadata that you might find lying around hidden from view is sometimes very useful. So the other thing I've got here are the variables. So in this case, I've already added the fugitive variable because that's the thing I'm trying to collect at the end of the day here. And I've already filled in the source. I'm going to collect information from Interpol in this particular case. So how do I go about doing it? What's the idea here? Well, obviously I've got a number of individuals here, and I want to collect information about each one of these individuals. So my starting point is to say, right, well, I want some sort of loop that loops through all of the individuals on this page. And if I just point at one of these and right-click on it, you can see this little menu comes up, which shows me the common actions that I might want to perform on this particular thing. So I might want to extract some information from this. I might want to test it. If I find this, then perhaps I'll do something else. In this particular case, I want to create a loop. So I'm just going to say, loop through all the tags that look like this. So it's built me a new step at the top here, and it's showing me in blue now the first iteration of that particular loop. And I can change the iteration, and you'll see as I change the iteration, it's highlighting the individual that corresponds to that iteration. So I've got a little loop that loops right to the end, that's the last iteration. Go back to the beginning if I want. Wherever. And now what I can do is, everything I do from this point onwards in the robot is defined relative to this blue box. So I'm just interested in the stuff going on inside it now. So let's try and start to map some of this information to our fugitive record down here. Well, it appears the next thing that we're looking for is the URL. So remember, we've got a details link here. So this URL down here is going to be the profile that relates to this particular person. So what I'd like to do is take that URL and map it to this particular attribute over here. Easy enough done. I'll just right click on the thing again. I choose to extract something. What do I want to extract? Well, actually it's a URL. Where do I want to map it? I want to map it to my fugitive.url attribute. So I now have a third step, extract the URL, and I now have the URL down here in the fugitive variable. The rest of this information is probably easiest dealt with if we have a look at this profile page. So the next thing I'll do is actually click that details link, which will take me to the underlying page associated with this person's profile. And then I can do things like start to extract the core information here. So this is the guy's name. So let's do an extract of the text and map it to the name field. And I have the name down here. But actually what I see in this particular case is I'm a bit fussy about the way I collect names. And it looks to me like Dennis, or possibly Denis, is his first name, and here is his surname. Now in my world, that's wrong. I have first names first, surnames last. So this is a sort of typical tidying up that you need to do when you build these robots. So a normal extract, like this extracting a name, just takes what we've got on the website. But actually I want to modify this a little bit, and I want to swap the first name and the surname round, because that's the way I do things. So what I'm going to do is go back and further configure this extract name step here. And one of the things I can do to any step is add additional converters. And there are many different types of converters that I can use to manipulate this information. And to start with, the first thing I'm going to do here is do a sort of sub-extract. So this is a really simple way of using regular expressions to further modify the content. So what we can see is this is the text that is found on the robot that's found on the page. I'm going to apply a regular expression pattern to it, and as a result of applying this pattern, it's going to give me some output. So to start with, it's just the full thing. But what I can see is there's a little comma there. So I'm going to extract the surname by saying, get me everything up to the comma, and then ignore the stuff afterwards. So now I just have the surname there. So if I click past it to execute it, you can see I just have the surname. So now I need his first name. So let's go back and do the same sort of thing. Take the name, extract it. I'll go full speed this time, rather than talk you through it. So I've extracted the name, but again, what I need to do is modify that a little bit. So let's build another extract rule here that says, right, well this time, ignore the bit at the beginning and just take the guy's first name, which looks about right. But now I need to sort of glue that together with what we've already got in the name field. So I'm going to string another converter here and say, look, take the input from the previous step and concatenate it with one of the variables that I already have called name. And now I have name in a format that I prefer. Actually, it's still uppercase, so I'm going to put in another text conversion there just to capitalise it. And that looks a lot better to me. So, as a result of those two steps, I now further manipulated that name so it's in exactly the right format for my requirements. So these manipulations are really easy to do. And you might notice that what we do is we do some interesting stuff like trimming spaces. This is a real pain when you build these sort of scripting rules to do this sort of thing, because you very often find spaces at the beginning and end of bits of text that you always have to trim off. So by default, we automatically strip off all those spaces every time. So what else have we got here? Well, what are they wanted for? Well, let's take this one here and extract the text to say wanted for. I think we've got a couple of other things. Let's just take the photo. So this is obviously the guy's photo, so let's extract that and let's map that as an image to the photo field. And the idea is once you've built up this rule, what we will do is then say, okay, well I now have one complete record that I'm interested in, so what am I going to do with it? Well, let's take this endpoint and say, let's insert a new step here to choose exactly what I'm going to do with it. And in this particular case, I'm going to store it in a database. I might generate some sort of file here and append it to a file, build an XML document or something with this, or send it back via an API. But in this particular case, I'm going to actually store this in a database. That was my requirement, get a consolidated list of these fugitives. So all being well, what I can do is now go into my debug mode, run this, and see what happens. So like all good debuggers, you can put breakpoints in there to see what's going on at any particular point. You can step through it one at a time to see if your logic's working. And in this particular case, it's gone through, no errors. So you can see I now have 9 different individuals and the records associated with those. So it's a good start. Obviously I've missed something here because unfortunately, if we look at the back here, if we look at the Interpol website, there is unfortunately more than one page of individuals here. So what I really need to capture everything is a slightly different loop. So I can do that sort of thing with branches, where what I'm going to do here is create a new loop that says I'm going to repeat something. So I'll choose a repeat to start with. What I'm going to repeat is this capturing all the information on one page, and I want to repeat that. And I want to repeat it coupled with a bit of extra logic, which is effectively take this next button, give it a click to get to the next page. So now we should be on page 2. And the idea then would be, when I add a new step here, I can say, right, let's close that repeat next loop, treat this as the next page, feed this back into the previous loop, and then I can process all the individuals on page 2. And I'll click the next button, get to page 3, get all those individuals, and we just keep going like that. Now there is one little gotcha here. If we have a look at the button on page 1, that I'm going to click, this is the button. If I move to page 2, this is the button that the robot thinks it should click to get to the next page. I was sort of hoping it was going to be that one to get to the next page. And this is sometimes, depending on the way the website is built, this sometimes happens. The issue here is on page 1, there is no previous button. But on subsequent pages, there will be a previous page button. So what we'll actually find here is, this is where you need to modify the automatic rule that the robot has built to make the robot a little bit more robust. So with this particular step, there is also a finder that defines which object on the page this step is going to interact with. And this is what we use for making these robots resilient to change. You can modify the rules that have automatically been created. The idea being, it will hopefully insulate you from the layout changes of the website at some point in the future. So what this one has said is, I've worked out that there's a whole bunch of div tags, a span tag and an anchor tag, and that's the thing you need to click on to get to the next page. Well, that's fine, it works for page 1, but not for page 2. So I'm going to make a more robust rule, and I'm going to say, look, I don't care about this hierarchy, just find me an anchor tag. And what I need to do is find something inside this item here that uniquely identifies it as the next button. And what I can see here is this arrow is actually an image, and it has an alt equal to next. So what I'm going to say is find me the anchor tag that has an image in it with alt equal to next. So I'm going to say, look, just look in the HTML, and I'll put a pattern in here that says alt equals next. And now if I check that rule, it finds the thing I'm interested in. So I've modified the rule subtly, so I've got a nice robust way of always identifying that next button. There's one final thing I'll point out, which is error handling. If you think about that logic, if we follow it through, on page 33 there's not going to be a next button because we've reached the end of the list. So at that point, this step is going to generate an error because it's been told to click a next button and it can't find the next button, which would normally result in the robot generating an error. But I know that's going to happen, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, let's just change the way the error handling works on this particular step. And I'll say, look, if you can't find the next button, break the loop. We've reached the end of the list, finish. And I can apply that error handling to any step. So if I go back into the debug view now, let's see how we get on. So you can see we're now looking at page 2, the second person on page 2. So we've got this list building up now, and hopefully that will just chug through, and I'm populating my database table called Fugitive with all the information from the Interpol website. So effectively I'm reaching out over the internet, dipping into Interpol's most wanted database, pulling the stuff back, formatting it in the way that I want it to be formatted, and dropping it in my local database as if it's the content that I want. Make sense? So to move this a little bit further on, and to show you how this would work operationally, so once I've built this process, what I'll do is I'll just save it, and the idea would then be, so how do I actually use this in an operational way? So what I'll do is I'm going to publish this up to my operational server. I'm going to pop it into a particular project called Intel, that will do. So I've now uploaded this thing to what we call our management console. So I'll show you our management console. It's basically the operational platform that enables me to administer the Kapow thing. It's already dumped me directly into the Intel project. So I can see all of the robots that I've got in this project. The one we've just looked at is this one here. It was uploaded at 15:03, which gives me a good time check. So I can see this is the one we've uploaded. And the idea would be, now what I've done here is I've obviously built one for the FBI and the Crime Stoppers and the FSA. So I've built various robots that do exactly the same thing, go and collect that stuff, map them to the fugitive object and dump them in a database. So typically what I do next is schedule these things. So what I can add schedules to this. I've got one here called Update the AML Blacklist, and effectively all this does is once a day at 3 AM, it runs all the robots that start with Most Wanted, which are effectively, at the moment, these ones. So given this naming convention, if I was to now go out and build another robot called Most Wanted Dow Jones, then that would automatically be subsumed into this schedule as soon as I publish that robot to my operational server. So effectively, every day it's going to run these robots. I don't know what that one is. What's that one? That just goes to the FSA. But it's slightly different. That's a blacklist rather than Most Wanted, whatever. The idea is I've got these robots running 3 o'clock every day. My database is refreshed. And actually, it really is refreshed. And what I mean by that is we will automatically deduplicate the content in that database. If I run a robot today, populate the database, great. Run it again tomorrow, presumably there's going to be some of that data still up on the website. There might be some new stuff, there might be some stuff deleted from the website. Well, we will store metadata against every one of these records to show whether that content is new today, actually been deleted from the website today, whether it's been updated or not, and if it's still there on the website. So you can do many queries like say, well, I'll tell you what, just give me the new stuff today. We do have some customers that are interested in deletions of information. We do a lot of work in the intelligence space. So if you take a forum, for example, where people post on forums, if you're trying to review the content on those forums, generally speaking, if there's an unmoderated forum, you never ever delete anything. The stuff just builds up as a massive archive over the years. So, if one of these robots comes back with, hang on a minute, a post has been deleted today that was there yesterday, that can sometimes ring alarm bells for some people. Why was that particular post deleted when they never ever delete anything? That rings alarm bells. Well, we've still got the post because we collected it yesterday, so we can have a look exactly what it says. So, interesting options there. Get the idea? So I now have a consolidated database that's automatically updated every day. But I still need a way of viewing that content in a nice, user-friendly way, so I can then go back and assist in terms of updating my original list. So I built another robot. How's that now? Built another robot. This is what I want to show you from a sort of programming point of view. It's very, very simple. It just uses some database queries, querying the database that we just created effectively. But this takes some input parameters. So I've got an additional variable down here that is asking for parameters at runtime. And what I can specify is the name of an individual that I want to search for, and potentially what crime I'm interested in, whether or not heinous crime they might have committed. So I built this robot. I've published it to the server again. Where that's gone, over here. So it's called Search Most Wanted. It should be in this project somewhere if we're really lucky. Anybody see it? There it is. Well, what I want to show you is the other thing that happens by publishing one of these robots to the server. What it will automatically do is deploy that robot as a web service. So by clicking this link here, this is showing me the web service URL of that particular robot. And in this particular case, it requires input parameters because it's expecting the name and what they're wanted for as input parameters. So I can try this out here in this little environment. So I know that there are some Jameses in that list. And in this particular case, I don't really care what crime they've committed. I'm just saying, find me all Jameses. Let's have the results in JSON, shall we? Test the web service. I'll just run that robot, which has done whatever it's got to do. And here we can see that there's a value from Crime Stoppers there. There's a URL. Here's a photo. It's base64 encoded, but there's the guy's name. So effectively, this is my synthetic API. I've built a robot. It's deployed automatically as a web service. I can then give that to a programmer and say, hey, there you go, there's an API for you, just call that and it will search this database for you automatically. Or go out to Interpol and collect the stuff from Interpol. And there's one final way I can access this stuff. I mean, that's fine for a programmer who knows about web services. But we do sort of make it easier for business users as well. So what I can actually do here is I can wrap any one of these robots here in what we call a caplet. So some of these robots would be sort of end user appropriate. Many of them aren't, so you don't deploy them like this. But as I'm logged in as the administrator, I'm looking at what we call my cap zone. So these are my caplets, my little applets that I might use. And I've got all sorts in here. I've got stuff that deals with collecting news from the BBC. I've got something that I've done for somebody that extracts EXIF information from photographs found online. What I'm interested in here is this particular one, which is the AML person search. So I just open this up. It's saying, okay, well, if I'm going to do an AML search, give me a name, give me what I want it for. So let's do that same one and we'll see what difference it makes. So James, maybe I want to schedule this run to run it every hour or so, I don't know. If it's a very long running robot, 15 hours, you know, just send me an email when you're done. I'm not going to sit around waiting for it. And if I hit the search button, it will execute. And you can see my result lists here. So these are all the queries that I've run in the past. So there's the one we've just done. So here's a nice sort of better way of viewing don't know too much of the details, are not pleasant. But here's a better way of viewing my database in a very nice, user-friendly manner. And obviously the idea would be I could then come along as part of my AML search, put in the name of the individual that I suspect that I want to check up on, and if, like Betty Bear here, it says, sorry, there are no results for your search, fantastic. That means Betty is a fine, upstanding citizen and we can do business with her. She has passed our AML check. That's wonderful. I'm not going to show you how I did the very final thing, but as an exercise in your imagination. This is a web app. I could build a robot to loop through each of these in turn, extracting the names of these individuals, calling that web service with the name as part of the input, and then, based on the results I get from that web service, editing the person's profile and changing into a pass or fail. So that's exactly what we did in reality. Closed the loop completely. So we actually got the robot to query the application, call the other robots that we've made that look into the database of fugitives, and then automatically update this thing. So not only do we provide them with a consolidated database, but also enable them to update their original application automatically as well. There's a few more bells and whistles to the final application, but just to put it into context, this whole thing didn't take me much longer to put together than it has to explain it to you today. It's probably a couple of hours worth of work, which compared with a traditional sort of IT project is orders of magnitude difference, and that's really where what the sort of profile of the projects that we work on for users, where they want to collect this information very quickly, easily, and efficiently. So hopefully that's given you an idea of what Kapow is all about. That's what I wanted to show you. So quite happy to take any questions should you have any.
Do we have any questions for Dominic? Yep.
Are there any legal implications of collecting the data? In the sense of appreciating what you've shown us there, but because you're going across the web and the data is freely accessible, I'm assuming there are no legal implications of acquiring.
There probably are. I don't think the boundaries have been fully tested yet. I've worked for Kapow for 8 years, and that was one of my first thoughts when I started at Kapow. I thought, okay, yeah, in the coming years I'm bound to see lots of lawsuits for people saying they're using my content illegally or what have you. But in reality, it hasn't happened. I know very few cases where that has happened. If anything, the opposite happens. Some of our customers are actually gathering evidence of what's going on websites and presenting that in the court of law. You may remember a few years ago, the biggest one was, do you remember the Pirate Bay, the peer-to-peer file sharing guys? Well, one of our customers, which is IFPI, International Federation for the Phonographic Industry, they were using Kapow to collect evidence of what was going on the Pirate Bay that they then used in court in Sweden to convict the Pirate Bay. I don't know of any cases where it's actually happened, where it's come to legal fisticuffs over this stuff. Our defence is the old gun seller's defence, which is we sell you, our customers, a tool. How they use it is their business. If they get in trouble for breaching terms of services with other websites, then that's their problem, not ours. But in reality, it just hasn't happened. I think it's a legal minefield, sort of a nascent area that hasn't fully developed and matured really. Nobody's pushed the boundaries just yet.
John?
Yeah. Following on from that, I mean, this is a big area. I mean, a lot of websites were talking about the valuation officer earlier, don't allow scraping. They specifically say you mustn't. And they've implemented anti-scraping technology on their websites that block IP addresses. They only allow so many lookups within a time frame. Do you have anything to stop IP addresses being blacklisted? Do you have anything that emulates particular browsers? How do you get around anti-scraping and stuff like that?
Yeah, there are two angles to that, really. One is not being blocked, which is your common or guarded requirement. You want to get the content. And the other one is a slightly more advanced thing, which is what the intelligence community tend to do, which is how do I get content without it even being noticed that I've got the content, which is a sort of scale beyond not being blocked.
Not being spotted.
Well, yes, there's non-attribution and there's even misattribution, which is actually making it look like somebody else is getting the content, which is again another level beyond that.
What the NSA?
I mentioned no agency names.
There's a very simple countermeasure which we use, which is just to put seeds in your database. You know straight away that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a common one. So as far as the sort of technical aspects of not being blocked are concerned, then we have a number of different things that we can do. So first and foremost, I can do things like change the HTTP headers. Too technical, but 1 minute I can appear to be Internet Explorer running on Windows 7 machine. The next minute I can look like Firefox old version on a Linux machine. And very often that's enough to throw web servers off because they say, okay, well I've got one IP address, but I've obviously got multiple different people using a browser from that IP address, therefore I'm not going to block you. And again, some of our intelligence customers have done some sophisticated stuff where they've worked out things like, well, this particular Chinese website, we know that 80% of their users use Internet Explorer and 20% use Chrome, more or less. Therefore, when the robot is run, 80% of the time it appears to be Internet Explorer and 20% of the time it looks like Chrome. What we can also do is throw in wait states to make the robot look more human. So rather than just blast the web server and try and grab everything just like that, you can do more sophisticated things like, again, you can do things like follow false navigation routes through websites. So you go to the home page and then you go to this menu item and click on a few links down there, and then you backtrack and you go wander off and go over there, and then you go to the content that you're looking for, extract that content, and the trace that you left on the server, really know what you're actually looking for. And then the other most common thing to do is to do things like IP rotation. So if you've got a big pool of cluster of proxy servers, then every time I extract one of these individuals, for example, I can switch to a new IP address. So I can just cycle randomly through a whole pool of proxy servers and do things that way. There are other measures as well. Capture is the other one that people ask about. I don't know if Ordnance Survey will do that. I'm not sure they do. You know what I mean by these captures? Those images that are really, really, really difficult to read for humans and impossible for something like these robots to read. Yeah, right. Okay. So we can handle those. There's a whole industry popped up in terms of solving those captures. So what I can do. Does anyone know Mechanical Turk, for example? Yeah, Amazon's Mechanical Turk. You can specify jobs that you want done. Like, for example, here's an image. Tell me what the text is on that image, and I'll pay you 20 US cents or something, a very small amount of money. So the idea there is you build a robot that gets to the capture, extracts the image, goes off and calls Mechanical Turk and says, here's an image, tell me what's on it. Takes a few seconds for somebody somewhere in the world to do that. You pick up the output, go back to your website, put that image in, put that code in and carry on. So I can completely automate those captures as well.
The Chinese might be helping to hack their own website.
It's possible.
I saw that image a minute ago.
I'll tell you what, it's a good story actually. One of our German colleagues, they want to do this sort of thing for a competitive intelligence thing where they're collecting content from their competitors' websites, and that website has capture images on it. So what our customer does is they have this robot that gets to the capture image, They extract that capture image, and then they push it into their own CMS, so it pops up on their own website. So when one of their customers logs into their website, the capture they're solving on their website is really the one that came from their competitor's website. So they get their own customers to solve the competitor's capture so that they can all completely automate or get their customers to help them out with the competitor's website. So with many of these things, if you have a bit of imagination, you can really pull together, orchestrate a whole string of very interesting events. It opens the mind a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, okay. Fascinating. I think it's 1:30 coffee time, so if we have coffee for 20 minutes, then I think we can just have a wrap-up discussion before it's drinking o'clock. That makes sense. But
Yep.
thank you.